Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Kim Kahnhauser Freeman, Executive Director of the Women's Foreign Policy Group, a network of international affairs professionals dedicated to advancing women's leadership, amplifying their voices through substantive global issues programming, and preparing the next generation of leaders through programs like today's discussion, our mentoring and professional development programs throughout the year. We are thrilled to have such a great group and impressive panel who will discuss their careers in international affairs, how they got to where they are, and what advice they have for those starting out. Today I'm joined by Bethany now I'm going to mess it up. Aquilina Brez, a senior advisor of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, Laura Catipon, Deputy Director of the Office of African and Middle Eastern Affairs at the U.S. Department of Energy, and also an alumna of two of our co-sponsoring schools today, GW and University of Delaware. I'd be remiss for not mentioning that. Sandra Pepera, Director of Gender, Women, and Democracy at NDI, and Sarah Yerkes, Senior Fellow for Carnegie's Middle East Program. I'm going to lead off with a few questions, but I'll be turning to all of you about halfway through for your questions, so please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. You can use that at any time during the program, and that way I can group questions together and we'll get to as many as possible. To start things off, I'm going to ask each of our wonderful panelists just introduce themselves and let us know how they got started in international affairs. Sarah, do you want to kick things off?
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk with all of you. So I'm a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment working in the Middle East arena. And I got interested in international affairs from childhood. My dad is an archaeologist, and so he kind of traveled the world. Sometimes I got to get to go with him on digs. And that exposed me to the world and to academia. And I kind of grew up thinking everyone had a PhD. But my other big formative experience was coming to DC in 8th grade. And I decided at that time that I wanted to be here and that I was going to kind of keep my eye on DC for the next decade until I found a way to finally get myself here and sort of, had this path straight through that I wanted to go into international relations. I didn't know exactly what that looked like. And I've kind of kept this somewhat linear path, which I think we'll talk about in a minute. But basically, I just wanted to also add one line that I think is important when you're at this stage of your life for you guys, which is that, there are some times when I look back and think, I never tried anything else. And, is this what I'm supposed to do? And I do get frustrated sometimes and sort of think, maybe I should open a bakery and do foreign policy as my hobby instead. But I just kind of keep coming back to this is what I love and this is the thing I'm best at. And I would really miss foreign policy if I switched to something else. So that's sort of the brief response.
Great. Sandra, how about you?
Thanks, Kim, and it's a pleasure to join everybody. I think really my interest in international relations is a part of who I am. I'm an immigrant. I was an immigrant to the United Kingdom with this huge family in Ghana, and obviously, straddling being raised in London and the southeast of England and going to university there and so forth. So I've always had that sort of international perspective. Clearly, I'm not English. So, the rest of the world was where I found my home and locus. And then thinking specifically about the things that have been my passion and my mission, the issues around, justice and equality and development, they were just part of our dinner table chat. These were things that everybody talked about in my household, not least because, yes, I do come from a long line of politicians. So it's just a consequence of where I was born and that perspective. And then the issues were what my family cared about.
Excellent. All right. I think we'll go to Lauren. I'm just going in the order on my screen now. Lauren and then Bethany.
So I am right now the Deputy Director for Middle East and Africa Affairs in the Office of International Affairs at the Department of Energy. In the past, I have been a Foreign Service officer. I was in the Foreign Service for 20 years, and I was headhunted by a corporation, by BP. So I left and went to BP and was a Senior Director for International Affairs there for a while, and frankly missed public service desperately, which gives you a clue as to what motivates me and why I got into foreign affairs as well. I've also been a director at the NSC, and I, once upon a time, way back in the day when I was a grad student at GW, I was also working part-time for USAID as a contractor in their private enterprise bureau. Going back to what sparked my interest, It goes way, way back. When I was a little kid, I was always very curious about my own family. 2 of my grandparents were born outside the United States, and I guess like 6 out of 8 of my grandparents or great-grandparents were immigrants. So it started with that, and from there I started studying languages and did that at University of Delaware as an undergraduate. And I was always more interested in the cultural aspects of language and cultural exchange. And I did a year abroad with Rutgers, actually, not with Delaware, as a junior. And that was just a life-changing experience for me. It opened my eyes wide open, and I discovered a love for a lot more than language and cultural exchange. I really became interested in history and in the history of relationships among countries. And so that's how I got started. And it's, a long story from there. So I'll cut it off there.
Bethany?
Well, I'm currently the senior advisor to the CEO at the Millennium Challenge Corporation, which is a U.S. government agency focused on reducing poverty through economic growth. I've actually been at MCC for almost 9 years in a couple different capacities, and I started there working on developing and implementing our grant programs. But before that, I worked with the United Nations in a couple of different countries and with some of their agencies. And most recently then before MCC at the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. So my career has always been focused on international and foreign policy. But like many of our panelists already said, one of the things that really got me interested was a trip abroad when I was 14 years old. And a constant curiosity and wanting to learn about places and people that were different than where I grew up. But I think what really got me hooked and then very certain that I wanted a career in foreign policy was in college with some of the courses I took and some of the professors and independent work I did with them. And it was just this curiosity of learning about other systems, other political systems, other cultures, the histories of different places that really just solidified for me that this was an area, a career field that I wanted to work in. And one of the first things I wanted to do was work for the United Nations. And so I'm very happy that I was able to get that experience not too long out of my graduate program. So I think it's something that I discovered what I was most interested in and feel incredibly fortunate to have been able to build a career and continue in the field that interests me the most and that I feel I can make the biggest contribution to.
Great, thank you, Bethany. So you all alluded to this a little bit with your career paths, but sometimes you take some pretty drastic turns. Some career paths are a little bit more linear, many aren't. Lauren, do you want to share a little bit about some of the turns you've taken along the way and when you realized it was time to reinvent yourself or not, depending, take that opportunity or not?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So yeah, my career has definitely, it's not been linear, but it's been very consistent. And I think at a 40,000 foot level, it's a little bit more linear than it actually was. I've reinvented myself numerous times, and part of that is really just the result of what a career in the Foreign Service is all about. Probably you're all aware, or some of you may have heard, that the Foreign Service is grouped into different specialties. There's an economic specialty and a political specialty and a few others. But in reality, FSOs are actually considered generalists, and you need to do whatever job is the right job at the time and you're the right person for. So in the Foreign Service, I did administration where I was a general services officer, and it was my job, for example, to negotiate leases with landlords for apartments and then oversee the renovations of those apartments in the then brand new Republic of Kazakhstan. That was my first tour. I've been a consular officer issuing visas and helping lost and sick diplomatic Americans and repatriating, unfortunately, deceased Americans. I've been an economic officer. That was my specialty. That was my cone. I've also worked in the political cone as well. So I've done, I actually wrote this down so you guys could understand the breadth of what happens and the kind of reinvention that can actually take place in some of these careers. I've done political, military, and non-proliferation. I've done energy geopolitics. I've done environment, including but not limited to climate. I've done mill-mill negotiations, arms control, election observing. I've done fiscal and regulatory issues in Western Europe and in Eastern Europe and the Caucasus. I've done trade negotiations. I've done commercial relations and investment, public affairs, you name it, I've done it. I also reinvented myself, as I said, after 20 years in the Foreign Service. I was approached by BP, and I decided to make the leap and try that. It was the right time for my family. And you know, the reinventions, I think, were sparked mainly by the balancing of work and life and what was going to work for my family. I am married. I got married right after the end of our orientation class in the Foreign Service. And my spouse then followed me in our first tour, and he ended up joining the State Department, and we had to balance our two careers throughout. So we were always reinventing ourselves. Along the way, we raised 4 kids as well. So when I jumped to the private sector, I tried it because it was the right time for us, and financially it was a great thing to do. And I'm glad that I did it, and it gave me really invaluable perspective on what matters from the private sector look at things, something I assumed that I knew all the way along because I had worked in the private sector before going to grad school. I had worked for Siemens, and I found out joining BP that I didn't understand it as well as I thought I had, and I had a lot to learn. So, you know, reinvention is also really good in a way that it not only depends on your curiosity, but it refreshes your curiosity about life. So I went back to public service because that's what I really missed. I found that in the private sector, I just was missing the spark of what mattered to me, what I thought mattered. And so I went back and joined, actually I worked for State Department before joining DOE. I went back and was a senior advisor at the State Department for a few months, and then went to this position at DOE. And I've been here for 4 years and reinvented myself as a deep specialist in energy, which was something that I had worked on in the Foreign Service, and had done energy geopolitics and had done climate related aspects of energy, but now I'm really deep into real energy diplomacy. So, well, I think that kind of covers how non-linear mine was.
No, great. Thank you, Lauren. And Sarah, you also did a stint in government and research at think tanks. Can you talk a little bit about kind of your career trajectory as well?
Sure. So the advice that I always give to young people starting out in foreign policy is that there is no trajectory. And I think, you know, at times this is really frustrating because we're not doctors, we're not lawyers with this kind of pretty prescribed career trajectory. But I think the beauty of that is that you can't go wrong. And so as long as you're kind of bouncing between things that are at least tangentially related to the foreign policy field, there's a lot of different options. And so I think, you know, kind of echoing a little bit of what Lauren said, you know, I don't really think that, I don't know if my career is linear or not, my trajectory, but to me, the foreign policy the trajectory is actually pretty wiggly. It's not kind of this straight line. So I think in that sense, maybe it is linear, if that line is a wiggly line. But, you know, as Kim said, like I bounced between academia, think tanks, government. My very first job was as a research assistant at the Brookings Institution right after I got a master's degree. And then from there, I went back and got a PhD. After that, I went and I did some stints as adjunct professor at GW and at Georgetown, then to the State Department and the Pentagon, then back to Brookings as a scholar, and then now to Carnegie, where I've been for about 4.5 years. But throughout all of that, I've kind of had this one similar thing, which is US foreign policy in the Middle East. And I've always been focused on that. And I think, you know, there's a lot of ways, again, that you can kind of get at different pieces of the same long-term goal. But I will mention one kind of blip that I've had in my career, which is when I was at the Pentagon. So I was a State Department detail lead to the Pentagon, not a career Pentagon person. And this is the only time in my life that I was not focused on the Middle East. And I was there as part of this kind of small team advising the Joint Chiefs of Staff on foreign policy issues. So we were supposed to be bringing in kind of a State Department perspective. And when I arrived, I found out that I was actually supposed to cover the globe. I thought I was going there to talk about the Middle East, to advise on these issues that I knew in and out. But I got there and they said, no, you need to come up with op-ed type papers on Russia, on North Korea. We need to get the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff smart on China. But why are you asking me to tell the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff about China? I don't know anything about China. But it turns out that, this was an incredibly scary experience that has benefited me tremendously. And I realized through this that the skills I had honed on the Middle East, research analysis, building a network of people I could talk to, these all actually could be applied outside of the Middle East. They're not Middle East specific skills. And so I think, taking these sort of what might seem like blips or might seem like jumps off of your career trajectory can actually be incredibly beneficial. And it helped me now later in life develop this confidence to be able to take on issues, new countries, new topics that I would have been terrified to tackle before, but I've learned kind of how to use some of those experiences to actually benefit me later on.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Bethany, can you talk a little bit about your trajectory? We also had a question from the audience, and I'm going to tie into that, about how you got your first job, working at the UN so soon after graduation. If we can tie that into your...
Sure. Well, why don't I start with that? So I was fortunate. I did my graduate studies in New York City at Columbia University. And so given that the United Nations headquarters was also in New York, we had the opportunity to do what was then called a practicum and basically do a real, pro bono, because we were graduate students, but do consulting work with some of the UN agencies. And I was fortunate to do some consulting work with United Nations Population Fund, focusing on population and reproductive health, specifically in Sudan. So working with the Humanitarian Response Unit in New York, we went over to Sudan for several months and worked with the UNFPA country office there and the government of Sudan and did a countrywide assessment of how the government was working with the UN and other organizational structures to address population and reproductive health issues. So I was fortunate in that it was part of my graduate program, but I got real life experience and was able to work with the UN on that project. That did introduce me to several people at UNFPA, working on different countries, different areas of the world, and on different issues. But I, through that, met someone working on gender and gender-based violence issues for UNFPA on countries all over the world. So I, expressed some interest, talked to them. I actually asked if I could do an informational interview with that person while I was still in graduate school, and found out a little bit more about the work they did and their career trajectory, and found it very useful. And then about a year later, when I was starting to look for jobs and wanted to focus a little bit more, I reached out to that person again and let them know, where I was in my career at the time. And a couple months later, they had an opportunity that came up. And so I ended up working with UNFPA in their Humanitarian Response Unit for about a year, a little more than that. And then through that, again, signed up for opportunities when they needed someone to go do some projects and other things in Kenya and Uganda and back to Sudan. I raised my hand. And I think that's really an important thing, is to take opportunities, whether you try to seek them out for yourself and approach people and let them know of your interest, or when others say, hey, we have this opportunity and we think that you should go do it. Really, really trust in that. People will see things in you, and they will see opportunity, and they will see your hard work. And when they give you those opportunities, I think it's important, if you can, to try to take them. I will mention, though, that I did have a career blip before I came into the U.S. government. And this speaks to what Lauren was saying a little bit about your personal life and other things going on in your life will have an impact on your career. And it can be positive and it can be a little challenging at times. But I, for personal reasons, needed to go to New Mexico for about 6 months and leave the UN. And so I took that as an opportunity to work on some domestic focused issues around environment, particularly on water and clean water issues. And that was totally different than anything I had been working on. But I, took it as an opportunity. It was something that I had to do in my personal life. And I actually learned a lot. I was able to hone my advocacy skills, work with people that I would never probably had the opportunity to meet had I not taken this. And then when I was able to, I did return to the UN, and was able to continue then in my foreign affairs and foreign policy career. And then an opportunity came up in Washington, D.C. to join the Millennium Challenge Corporation and be part of the U.S. government. And again, I looked at where I was in my life, both in my career and the next steps I wanted to take, but also where I was in my personal life at the time. And that was an opportunity then that I was able to take and came into the U.S. government. But I do think that it's really important that I thought when I was young, fresh out of school, that what I wanted to do for my career, I would just go head first into it and take the opportunities that I wanted to do. But as others have mentioned, it's very important to think about the things that are going on within your family, whether that's with children or marriage or within your extended family. All of those things can have an impact. And in the end, your career will be long. Someone, I think Sarah mentioned a little bit of a wiggle or a squiggle, but it does not have to be linear. And in the end, all of your opportunities that you do take, you will come away with skills that can be applied to anything you do. So I think if you look at things as opportunities and they may not be what you expected to do, still look at it as what can I gain and what can I contribute with what I'm doing now. And I, just encourage people that you will find your way back if you take a transition or you take an exit. You can find your way back, especially if it's in a field that you really do want to be in. It can be harder, but you can reach out to people and make sure that you're continuing to hone your skills and take those opportunities when people either select you or you think that there's an opportunity that you want to do. Raise your hand and do not be afraid to raise your hand. Do not wait also until you have what you may feel that you check all the boxes for this particular opportunity. Put your hand up. You can gain a lot by doing that.
Great, thank you, Bethany. And Sandra, you've also skipped around not only careers, but also countries. So can you talk a little bit about your trajectory?
Thanks, Kim. I think the best way to describe my trajectory is sort of like those Lemony Snicket books, a series of unfortunate events, and you kind of go along, and then you take a couple of zigs and a zag, and whoa, suddenly you've got a 40-year-long career. And I say that only to illustrate that I'm really out the other end of the career, and still thinking about what the next steps might be and how to continue to grow and to contribute. So I liked what Lauren said about, if you look at the context of what I've done, there should be a clear similarity. I think a commitment to progressive causes, a commitment to internationalism, and those sorts of issues, an ability to reinvent myself as well. I think Lauren also used that term. And then to Sarah and Lauren's points, moving around the kind of table in terms of where you ply your trade, so to speak. So I started off in British politics. I then went to Ghana and I became a university lecturer. And then I came back to the United Kingdom and I went into an intergovernmental organization. And then I went into the British civil service and enjoyed public service greatly. Left the public service and I came to the US, and I have this great job with the National Democratic Institute. So I've pretty much done every sector that you can do except the private sector. I wouldn't even know where to begin if I were to join the private sector, but that's another thing. But I think all to say, and to really echo Bethany's point, my career has somewhat been defined by my personal life in a way. So the reason I moved back to Ghana, which is definitely the country of my heritage, was because I got married. And, you know, we said, yes, let's go to Ghana and set up there and do great things. And we did. We went to Ghana and we set up there, and I did great things, of course. But then I fell out of my marriage. So I had to come back to the United Kingdom because that was the way I was going to be able to, as a single mother, raise my 3 kids independently. And then in the United Kingdom, the choice of job was determined as well about, okay, could I really be this international negotiator for politics and peace processes in Africa with 3 kids under 10 at home? Well, no, that wasn't really sustainable. So after 5 years of that, I found a rather more stable and predictable job in the Department for International Development, which is the UK's USAID. And then you're looking at, okay, how does your career grow? And one of the things to grow my career was to take postings overseas. And so I took 3 postings overseas. And you get to a point then now, oh, okay, the kids are all grown up. And maybe I don't have to do this postings overseas business any longer. Maybe I want to change in my life. And that was the zag, if you like. I left the public service in the UK, and I got this job here in DC, and I've been here for the last 6 years. But, you know, I'm going to share probably too much information with you all right now, but I made that last move at the great age of 56. Oh, maybe I was 55. Anyways, 50 something. And so just to show and to indicate that you are, Bethany's right, you are going to have long careers. You have time. You have time to make a few mistakes. You have time to zig and zag. I think we're going to come on to this perhaps. I think the world of work is changing massively, not just because of COVID and we've all got headsets and we're Zooming all the time now. I think the world of work was changing massively before that. I'm a great fan of Anne-Marie Slaughter. I think she's done some interesting work on this. So thinking very much about what you want your career to look like, taking hold of it, being in charge of it, being in control of it. The most important thing is to have the ability to make the choices at the right time. So you must give yourself the portfolio of skills and experience and outlook that will allow you to take those opportunities that Bethany was talking about as they come along and as they present themselves. So you know, don't be worried if it doesn't look like what you thought it was going to look like when you were 21. When you get to, you know, you're 29, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. You are learning and you're growing all the time. Make sure you give yourself the choices, and you can have, you know, as interesting and as stellar and as different a career as you wish to have. And I think because you're going to be working really long, you know, I'm 60 already. Am I 60? Yeah, I'm 60 already, and I'm still working. And you know, you're all going to be working until you're 100. So you know, these are very long careers, and really think about what's going to make you happy through them. Don't be afraid of taking some chances, but always give yourself the ability to be in the to take the opportunities that come up, and that's about really thinking about what are you putting in that portfolio of, as I said, skills, experience,
Great, thank
and
you,
interest.
Sandra. And you know, from all of you, it's I think so important to hear when you look at someone's bio, you see all these incredible titles that they've had, but kind of what led them down that path, and what choices they made, chances they took. Bethany, you mentioned a little bit about the importance of network. Can you talk a little bit about how to build that network when you're in school, after school, find those mentors, the people who can help you, guide you as you're making those decisions, and any tips for doing that in the virtual world now?
Sure. I will say that when I was first starting out, this was not something, building a network or trying to network was not something I was as comfortable with as I have come to be. But I think the important thing to realize is I thought I was bothering people initially if I reached out. But you're not. And this is how you learn. This is how you meet other people, particularly when you're first starting out in your career field. And you think you may know exactly what you want to do, but you want to hear from people who are doing different jobs or have different opportunities in your chosen career field. So I did make sure that early on I made use of my college and graduate school alumni networks. And I basically sent people emails, reached out, cold called, asked to meet people for coffee. That was, way back when in real life. But I also, I had a specific set of questions and things that I wanted to ask someone. I always appreciated their time and their expertise. And some people I ended up staying in touch with. Other people, there were opportunities that, I reached out for that then didn't work out. But I do think it's important, utilize your alumni networks. If there are companies or government agencies or other areas where you do want to work, go on their websites, look up people. If their contact information is there, I encourage you to reach out. Most people, when I've done that or when I've had people do that to me, you are able to meet up and to talk. And most people really do, want to help out and want to talk. I think it's important that when you are at a company or at an agency, network even within where you're working. So that's getting to know the people that you're working with or reaching out to people who might be on other teams, other divisions or bureaus or things. And again, talking with them about their experiences, what led them to be where they are now, where they might want to go. So that's important. But also I would encourage you to also join trade associations or groups like this group to really try to meet people that you would not necessarily maybe come across where you're working or in your current work networks. And finally, I'll say for the virtual environment, I've actually still, done coffees with people just virtually where we've literally each had a coffee. It's not as easy sometimes to do it over Zoom or on the phone, but you make the best with the situation we're in now. If there were people within Washington, I would try to meet them safely outside if we could. But for most things, again, you can reach out through your alumni networks, through LinkedIn, through organizations. Most people are happy to meet and have brief discussions. And you also never know if someone is going to say something that piques your interest in something, or they mention something and it leads you, to look down that path. I just encourage you to make those attempts and to be open to what you hear.
Great, thank you, Bethany. And one of the advantages now, everyone knows how to use, people knew how to use the telephone before, but knows how to use video calling and conferencing, so you can reach out to people beyond your geographical location too, which can be helpful when you're trying to figure out how to move to DC or get a job here in New York at the UN, work abroad. Also, kind of keeping on the 2020 theme, the job market, as you said, Sandra, has changed a lot. What sort of skills do you think are more helpful now with recent grads looking for a job? What should students really look to highlight or really improve on before they graduate as they're looking for a job in this now mostly virtual environment?
So I think the how I'm going to answer this is to say, and again, it's been something that we've all said is, make sure that you really do distill from each and every opportunity your new learning, and don't hide that. It could be that some of you are going to be waitressing for the next couple of years because the job market is such. That's fine. Waitress excellently. I've waitressed. I even worked in a factory. So do that, do it excellently. But then when you come to write your CV, what is it that you did in that job that is relevant to what you want to do next? Okay, so if you have been a waitress, hey, guess what? You're good at interpersonal relations. You're good at stakeholder management. You can add up very quickly, and you know you can. You've got a great sense of spatial awareness. I mean, there's so many things and skills and expertise in doing what you're doing. Be sure that you don't sort of skip over it as if it's unimportant. Every opportunity to learn, you distill what you learn from it, and you present that as part of your ongoing portfolio of and demonstrating why you're going to be value added to whichever organization you are going to apply it towards. So I really do think that, and I say this with some experience, because when I left university many decades ago, we were also in something of a slump in the United Kingdom, and it was really difficult to find a job. I told you I worked in a factory. I waitressed. I was also a get out the vote person for one of the local councils. I mean, I did all sorts of things for a full 18 months before I got my first sort of internship in the House of Commons and Parliament in London. But I didn't let anybody kind of dismiss those things. I didn't let anybody sort of sweep them aside as if I hadn't been doing anything for 18 months. I'd been working excellently. I'd been honing all sorts of skills, and I presented those skills as being worthwhile to my new employers. So I think that's, for me, that's the key thing. This is a very iffy job market right now. We don't know where it's going to go. The public services are shrinking and expanding like accordions all the time. So thinking very much about what are you doing, how are you doing that, can you really present those opportunities and that experience in a way that makes you attractive to the job market. That, for me, is the key thing. And learn how to take really good notes. Learn how to take really good notes, because really good notes will get you through any public sector or public service job. They don't have to be long notes, they have to be good notes.
And on that note, Lauren, I'm going to switch the question a little bit for you to incorporate one of the questions from our audience. Can you talk about what skills you found that have been transferable skills that really have helped you in each of your careers, in addition to taking really good notes, like Sandra said?
I can't say enough about taking good notes, actually. She's absolutely right, Sandra. Thank you for raising that. Yeah, you know, when I thought a little bit about this kind of question, I think not only of skills, but also about kinds of qualities that you need to have, or that are helpful to have or to cultivate in yourself as you go through this. I think you've probably discerned by now, international affairs is more of an art and not a defined thing. It's not like becoming a doctor or a lawyer where you progress through different defined stages and you check boxes and you do a residency and things like that, or you pass the bar and suddenly everything is go. So, you know, what I have found useful and what I hear echoed in the comments that I'm hearing from all of my colleagues here today is that really it comes down to bringing a sense of curiosity to everything you do. Optimism, be pragmatic. If you're pragmatic in what you're facing, you know, it will help you be resilient as you move through the different stages of going wherever the road will be taking you. Be creative. Be a critical thinker. That's very important. The ability to question what's going on around you in a logical way, but also being able to think critically about your own motives, your own beliefs, and being aware of what you are wanting. Cultivating intellectual rigor and precision in what you do and in your products. And that gets back to what Sandra was saying about be excellent at whatever you're doing. She's absolutely right. Be able to sort of define for yourself what success is in any given situation in which you find yourself. Be able also to recognize what an acceptable compromise might be from your perspective and from the other person's perspective. You need to cultivate a sense of empathy for the people that you're with so that you can understand what's motivating them. That will be very helpful. you know, I think a lot of bouncing around through different ways and finding your way through a career in international affairs has to do with being street smart sometimes. Sometimes you need to emphasize a practical solution over an elegant solution. You can't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. You know, sometimes when you're looking at what opportunities are in front of you, be honest about the opportunity and look for what it can be. Look for what you can turn that opportunity into and how you can make the most of it. I think as a hiring manager, I would say the skills that I look for when I'm looking to hire someone into an international affairs position really, again, come down to some of these qualities that people embody more than a set of specific experiences. Yes, it's great if someone applying for a job has international experience already, but it's not a prerequisite most of the time. It's desirable, but really what's more important for me is someone that I can tell has critical thinking skills, someone who is able to cogently articulate a thought or an argument and do it succinctly. To be able to do that verbally as well as in writing is just absolutely critical when I'm hiring someone. I would say the ability to negotiate a situation, whether you're negotiating a thing like a document, or whether you're just working your way through a conversation with someone you've never met before, being able to turn and pivot and listen. So it comes down to active listening skills as well. On the more tangible set of things, economic literacy is so important today. Do study some economics, do study macro, do understand micro. It's invaluable, really. I would also say be aware of global trends and US foreign policy trends. Be technologically competent. That's something that I'm not as technologically competent as I wish I could be. And I'm very envious of people who have come behind me and have been more successful in that, but it's also obviously necessary in this day and age. How do you get these qualities? How do you cultivate them? How do you develop these skills? Really, it comes down to engaging, doing what you're doing today by listening to all of us talk about our experiences, but also reaching out, the networking aspect, but just participating and daring yourself to speak up. And to actually engage in a conversation. Learn to organize yourself, learn to organize others, organize events on things that you're interested in and are passionate about. It gives you a chance to explore your passion and to lead. Take the opportunity to lead in whatever situation you find yourself in. If you're a waitress, be a damn good waitress, but also lead the other waitresses in caring about being great waitresses. You know, just take every opportunity to develop yourself as a well-rounded individual and just really stay engaged. It's very hard in a COVID situation to stay engaged.
Well, it's a perfect tie-in to discussing, you know, I used to call it the work-life balance question, and I got reprimanded by a very senior woman ambassador at an event that I should talk about blending and not balancing, and that was an unfair way of wording it. And this year has been particularly difficult. How have you all kept your energy up? How have you chosen, you know, international opportunities? You talked a little bit about this in your career directory of making sure that you are a well-rounded person, that you have space to recharge for things beyond work in a sector that really will absorb you entirely if you let it. Sandra, or sorry, let's start with Sarah, actually, because you haven't spoken all a while.
Sure, thanks. Well, I'm saying this as I hear my children in the background, so this is perfect timing. But, you know, I would say it's really hard. And I think that, you know, the older I've gotten, further along in my career, I've realized how important it is to be honest about that with you guys, with this next generation, that this is hard. And I say that not to discourage you, but so that you know you're not alone. And when you get to this point, we may already be there, where you have kids or other obligations, you're not the only one having to go through this. And I have two little kids. They've been home with me in virtual school for 8 months. It's been lovely, but also terrible. And I think, you know, this is something that unfortunately right now we have to really, really deal with, but hopefully this is an anomaly. So I'm going to focus more on normal times, not on COVID times. And I think, you know, the way that I've kind of tried to deal with this with the balance or the blending question, is advice, I think, from Anne-Marie Slaughter, actually, who was already mentioned once, but from her article that she wrote about 8 years ago, when I was actually pregnant with my first daughter and about to start her career at the State Department, when she was writing about that women can't have it all. And I think that actually that might sound self-defeating, but what I took away from that and continue to take away from that is that you have to give yourself grace. And I think that it's once you accept that you're not expected to be amazing at both work and parenting or other life issues or, you know, dealing with your own parents, you don't have to be amazing at all those things at the same time, and no one is expecting you to be. You can kind of take a deep breath. And I think you don't need to give up on any aspect of that, but cut yourself some slack. You know, you might not be the Secretary of State ever, or you might not be a CEO by the time you're 40, but that's okay. Just like it's okay if my kid sits and watches a movie in the middle of the day so that I can actually do 2 hours of uninterrupted work. You know, don't expect yourself to be Superwoman. I think that that's so much more harmful than it is to just allow yourself that you're doing okay. And the other really important thing, this has come up a couple of times, is that it's okay and expected to ask for help. And I think, you know, career-wise, that means seeking mentors, but more importantly, finding good bosses and good organizations who value family time and asking for help in all aspects of your life. And this is what has brought me repeatedly back to the think tank world. I love the think tank world because, one, I have access to policymakers. I feel like I'm making a difference. My voice is heard. I'm able to kind of use the skills that I really think I'm good at, but I also have the flexibility to be at home when I need to be. And so even pre-COVID, you know, I made it a really big point. Both my kids are 4 and 8. I would try to chaperone all of their field trips. I could do that because I had a boss who valued time outside of the office. In the COVID times, I've been just increasingly proud of my bosses and all the way up to our president at allowing us to have the flexibility to be home. We're not going to be forced to go back into the office until the schools are open. They've said that, you know, that matters. A lot of places wouldn't say that. And on the flip side of that, I think in my own career, you know, I did not find that sort of flexibility or that sort of understanding when I was in government. And I can get into this more in the Q&A if you want, but basically, you know, I left government. I chose to leave government when I was pregnant with my second daughter because for me, I couldn't do it. I could not imagine continuing to do my job in government with 2 small kids. And so I think, you know, being aware of yourself, aware of the limitations, which don't have to be limitations, that brought me into the think tank world as a scholar, which has made me the most fulfilled I've ever been in my life. So, you know, have grace, treat yourself well, and realize that it's okay to not do it all or not do it all well at the same time.
Thank you. Sandra, you talked a little bit about your choices to move, but how have you kept energy up during all this?
Well, let me pick up also on what Sarah's just said about, you know, raising children. And I mentioned that I'd been a single carer, at least for most of my my career once I left Ghana. And I left Ghana, my youngest was 1, and I had 2 older children of 3 and 6. So from then on, basically, I was their single parent. And a couple of things. First of all, and I know that this is going to get a really bad reaction because you're all Americans and you hate the idea. But, you know, looking around at my institutions, I found the institutions that were going to give me the help that I needed to raise them. And so, you know, when I got to DFID and I thought, okay, I need to make this choice about taking overseas posts. My great good fortune at the time was that the British government would pay for boarding school for your children. And so my children boarded for a number of years whilst I was traveling overseas. Now in the UK and in Europe, that's not as heinous a crime on children as you all think it is here in the United States. But it's an option for those of you who are inclined to take it. But I think really on a daily basis, this business about giving yourself grace, Sarah wonderfully said, but also, you know, in the lingo today, you know, the self-care thing. So how do I know that I'm going to be likely to bring the best of myself to my work and to my community? I need to have 3 things in balance. I need to be somewhat physically fit, you know, somewhat being the objective word there. I need to have a level of spiritual well-being. I'm a Christian, I'm an Episcopalian, nothing very radical, but I do quite like going to church every Sunday. It helps me. It really brings me to a place of spiritual equilibrium. And the third thing I do need to be is intellectually challenged. So, you know, I'm always reading these days, a lot of trolling across internets and stuff for interesting issues. Not all, to the point made earlier, not all about what I do on a daily basis. I have recently completed a course in massage therapy. And that was just to give myself something else to think about, and actually different people to talk to, regular Americans, very, very regular Americans I met, which is great. You know, thinking about what it is that allows you to bring your best to each day is important, and how you put yourself in a good and healthy and energetic space, I think is something that you should all work out. And the earlier you work it out, the better, because it impacts how you deal with other things as well. It's not just about your work, but it's about how you bring yourself to your community, to your family, and to the mission. And most of you are likely to be mission-driven people, so you have to have a way of keeping yourself in some level of kilter. Otherwise, you will burn out, and that's not a good look.
Thank you, Sandra. Lauren, can you talk a little bit? We also had a couple of questions in the Q&A about what it's like balancing moving around the world as a foreign service officer as well. So if you could wrap that into your answer.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. You know, it's challenging. It was something that I loved to do. It's notoriously difficult for families, and rightly so. I mean, the reasons for that are obvious. It's challenging to raise children. It's challenging for children to be raised in the Foreign Service. There are a lot of support networks that are out there. I was very lucky in that my husband actually chose to follow me to my first post. We actually did get married. We were engaged when I went into A100. And that was a personal choice on his part. But, you know, all of these factors that can be difficult to balance. So you have to go into it with your eyes open. You have to kind of be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with the people that you care about. And you need to pay attention to, you know, what's happening to the people that you care about as you're moving around. Because as somebody said earlier, you know, this job, this career path, whether you're in the Foreign Service or anywhere, if you love what you're doing, regardless of international affairs, you will be absorbed by it intellectually and emotionally. You will invest yourself in it if you're doing something that you really care about to begin with. And I think that the challenges that come with that in terms of work-life balance and being aware of your family's needs are the same, even if you're not traveling around the world. The upside that I have seen to the travel and the constant moving around and the disruption is I have incredibly resilient children. I have children who really appreciate the world around them and who understand the global context much more than the kids that they have met here in their local schools in the US. And they have provided a perspective when they've come home to their friends here in the US that I think has been eye-opening for them to be resources to the kids around them and valuable to the kids around them. And they've gone on to have more realistic expectations of themselves as well. They're a little bit more aware of how they need to balance themselves too. It's kind of a rambling answer to the question, but I'm happy to talk in more detail offline as well. But yeah, it's very challenging. The challenges are evident. They're well known, they're well documented, and there are support systems. The expat community overseas is always going to be a huge resource. Things have changed a lot over the years in terms of support for spouses who are quote unquote trailing spouses, whether they're men who have left behind careers to follow their wives or vice versa. And there are also tremendous resources for people who actually are continuing to meet the challenges of being a dual career family moving around the world. And it does does really help. And just knowing that there's a tribe of people out there who are going through the same things helps. And you'll find that tribe anywhere in the international affairs world. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. And Bethany, what keeps you going? We've touched on so many different pieces. I'm not quite sure which angle you're going to go with it.
Sure. So one of the things before I had children that I asked some of my particularly my female mentors, but a few of my male mentors, was, can you tell me the secret? What is the secret? There must be some secret of how you make it all work. And there's not a secret. It is a little bit different for everybody on how you make it work. I have 2 young children now, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. My husband also has a full-time career. And when I actually was pregnant with both of them, is when also corresponded with when I was rising up in my career, which was a challenge. It made me have to travel a lot. I, had to, leave my infant, thankfully with my family and my husband. And then I had to pump milk for my baby in airports all over the world and find a way to bring it home. There's a way you can make it all work, but one thing that you cannot do it on your own. And you do need a support network, as Lauren mentioned, whether that's your friends, family, friends who are family, if you are living abroad. Do not be afraid to ask for help. I got myself, I think, into a little trouble in that I sort of refused to ask for help with my first son when I initially first went back to work, and I realized very quickly that wasn't going to work. If people were offering, if I needed to also say specifically what I needed help with. And also then I was, I had understanding bosses at the time and teammates, because there was a period of time when I had really young children were working very long hours at the office, was more challenging. But in a lot of these roles, if you do have flexibility, it just means that you'll be able to, leave the office, but the work may still remain and you may still need to do it, log on back for what's called, I think Anne-Marie and others have called this sort of the second shift, where you begin your workday again after your children have gone to bed. But one thing I've tried to do, and it's very hard, so I don't ever use the word balance, but finding time for your career and doing the things you need to do for your roles, plus finding time for your family and doing things you need to do to support your family, and then finding time what you need to do for yourself to keep yourself mentally and physically healthy. Often that last part is the first to go when you're really, really busy. Your job needs you, you've got responsibilities, people are relying on you. Your employees are relying on you, and then your family is relying on you. And I won't just say with young children, because I think it's when children are at different ages, they need their family for different things. And even people that I work with right now are supporting their parents and other extended family members as they get onto a later stage in their life. So a lot of times your self-care and the things that you do for yourself, whatever fulfills you, can be the first to go. So I try to even get a little bit of that time in. I know exactly what fulfills me. And also I have learned through the years, through trial and error, when I feel that battery getting way too low and I need to do something to recharge myself. It's important to recognize, I think, for yourself when you're getting to that point, because if your battery is completely depleted, you will not be good for what you're doing at your job. You will not be good for your family. You can't be the best, or even try to be the best when you're fully depleted. So it's sort of that, I know people say it a lot and it sounds cliche, but putting your oxygen mask on first before helping others is something that you do need to be mindful of. And I will say that I'm, incredibly lucky that for part of my career, you also have to think about sort of putting your foot a little bit on the brake or easing up on the gas, and then knowing also when there are opportunities when you really need to put your foot on the gas. But that has to be balanced and managed with what's going on with your family. Do your children need more of your attention at the time? Are there things going on? Can your spouse, if you are in a partnership, can they step back? Do they need to step back from their career if you need to accelerate? Is there other support you need to bring in? You know, what does that mean financially? All of those are things that you just need to think about. They can be challenging. And I will say that nothing is ever smooth sailing. And if I have a day where everything goes right, I sort of look around and be like, how did that happen? But you do need to ask for help. You do need to know yourself and know when you need to be recharged. And you do need to know when the people in your life need you and what they need from you, and when they need more of you. Certainly, as Sarah mentioned, this pandemic has had everyone working and learning and living at home, and also brought different challenges for everyone. And so just having that ability to find what keeps you ticking and making time for that. And it's had to change for me. The things that really keep me going have had to change a little bit because of the pandemic and keeping everyone home and healthy and things like that. But I have found new things. I've found I really like puzzles. And so when I can find the time and make the time for that, those for me are very calming and give me a little break from everything else that I'm thinking about. So it will be a challenge, but at the same time, I think it's enriched my career and enriched my life and taught me, for example, like organizational skills are really, really key. But it's also taught me to, I think, also have empathy for the people I'm working with, and my employees about the things that are going on in their lives, and to really recognize that people are whole beings. They're not just employees, they're human beings who have lives and interests outside of their work field.
Thank you, Bethany. Thanks so much. And I know we're already a little past 1 o'clock and everyone's trying to get to the career fair, but if I could get one sentence, no more, lightning round from everyone of one piece of advice that you'd like to leave the students with today. Sarah, why don't we kick off with you, not to put you on the spot.
No problem. So I guess the last thing I'll say is that you know more and you're more experienced than you realize. This is the imposter syndrome issue. Everyone has imposter syndrome. I have it still all the time at various points in my career. You know things, raise your hand, let your voice be heard. Don't think that you aren't prepared or that you're not worth it.
Thank you. Lauren.
I think it would be just that, sorry, my dog decided to bark right now. I think it would be that, one man's risk is another man's opportunity, and don't be afraid to be iconoclastic or to go out there in an unconventional way and follow your passion. Just go ahead and do it. It's safe to do it and you will love doing it.
Thank you. Bethany.
I will say definitely have a plan for your career, but be willing to adjust, and also be willing to take an opportunity. If that path takes you off what you thought you would initially do, that's okay, and it may lead to something that is way more fulfilling than you ever imagined. So have a plan, but be willing to readjust and check in with yourself on your plan regularly.
Sandra. Last but not least.
So I would say, of course, all the above. I think great one-liners from my colleagues here. And I would only add, you do have to live your life according to your values and with the integrity of those values. When I was starting out, people said, live an authentic life. I'm not sure whether that's still the lingo, but there is something about living your values, because all the other good stuff we've given you and we've shared with you becomes very much more difficult if you're not living your values. So I would say, that's my parting 2 cents.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to share their insights and experiences with all of us. Let's give them a big round of applause, which we can't hear, but I'm sure you're doing. And thank you all for joining us and for your excellent questions. We hope that you'll stay engaged with the Women's Foreign Policy Group and that you'll join us again, either virtually or one day eventually in person. And we invite you all to join the career fair. It's on Handshakes. If you log into your Handshake account, you can meet with other employers and learn a little bit more about the opportunities out there. Thanks so much and have a good day.